Hello, I am Orman Redwood, and I am starting a series on r/place. I am starting my project recording the history of r/place on video. I haven't done this in a long time because I can't really produce that high quality of stuff. Um, but I decided, most YouTubers start out trash and I'm just starting. So here is my videos on r/place. So as you can see, I'm beginning to make a script for it. I've just started. And so I don't actually have a script for this video, and I'm not actually talking about the history of r/place in general. Instead, I want to talk to you about time lapses recording the event, because I have watched many time lapses of 2017 and 2022, and I want to talk to you about which ones are actually good, um, what they're, which ones I would not recommend, and which ones are quite flawed. So I'll be looking for them with my channel right here that you're watching this video on. So first off, if we just look up r/place time lapse, this is a relatively new account, so it should largely go to the popular stuff. So there's this one right here, which I'll talk about later. It has 95,000 views, and it's one of the better ones. Um, but really, the most popular ones are this Reddit time lapse, r/place 2022 by Reddit, and this time lapse of 2017 by Gherkin Gaywars. So I want to talk about the 2017 time lapses first. And if we just open this highly popular r/place 2017 time lapse, just notice what the very first frame of the video looks like. Just look at it for a second. Does this look like an r/place that just started? I'm just asking you. Like, does this actually look like r/place when it just started? And the answer is no, it does not. So let's see. I actually need this post up. And this is a problem with a lot of 2017 time lapses, whether it's fast or slow. A lot of them have a lot of them display r/place, but the very first frame is actually relatively far in to the first hour or so of the experiment. And because of that, it looks like all the events of r/place, it looks like nothing's really happened yet. But in reality, there is some important events that have happened before this that are important to know about. So this image right here comes after an important moment in r/place's history, where the moderators stopped having everyone who joined r/place start in the very center of the canvas, and made it to where they started out at random locations. And the reason they did that is because this thing in the center, what you obviously know what it is. It's very obvious what it is. The developers were concerned that this thing was developing in the center, and their solution to get more things to develop, more interesting things to develop, was to have people start in random locations. Well, that event is before the start of this time lapse. And there's also another important event, the start of r/place. So something you won't know if you look at these time lapses, the normal time lapses for 2017, is that r/place, when it started, the canvas of r/place was actually active long before the event was open to the public. The day before, the moderators were testing out the system, placing pixels here and there, and making sure the whole thing worked. And this longer time lapse by David Jill will show you that time, which compared to the rest of the event, if you see this bubble where the most replays have happened, the relative to the whole length of the event, the essentially prehistoric time when moderators were testing out the system was actually pretty long. Though, of course, there's a significant amount of time where they haven't placed. And not only that, but even after the event starts, you can see the first structure to emerge is a green box. And I mean, that's important to the history of some factions, but it's just interesting to note that this green box, the boxiness of this structure is essentially invisible in most time lapses because of how late they start. But it's important to note that that green box was in fact the first major object on the canvas. And that's something that the time lapses, because they generally start so late, cover up. And so this time lapse is great because it shows, the testing phase of r/place. It also shows the early development, and of course it shows everything else accurately and slowly enough that you can get all the information. But it is 1 hour and 28 minutes. So if you want a time lapse that has all of these advantages, but is maybe a bit shorter, what you want is the time lapse by timelapse. If I can find it. As you know, these actually good time lapses are not very popular. r/place. So I'm actually going to have to go to a very similar time lapse. Time lapse 2022 60 times speed. So this time lapse is very similar to the one I showed you. Twit's sad. I'm sorry, since I'm doing this on YouTube, I took a really cute... These are going to be ads I don't even get paid for. That's annoying. Because I don't have ad block. That might be good if I use this system regularly. But he has this r/place time lapse from 2017 that basically it shows all the same stuff as the 1 hour and 28 time lapse right here. But its advantage is that it is only 8 minutes long. So yeah, it's the second time lapse I use when I want to get a sense of the event, whereas I use David Jill's time lapse to get to have a more of an appreciation for the details of what happened during the event. So those two time lapses are ones I would highly recommend, and I'm going to have them on a public playlist with other r/place time lapses. But are there any other time lapses I would recommend? Well, there is another important time lapse. So let's see. On YouTube, and its advantage is that first off, it has an even shorter version of r/place, of the r/place time lapse. It doesn't go back to the beginning, which is not great, but it is significantly faster. But what's important to note is that it has a time lapse that zooms into each and every region of the canvas. This is Merrimack's time lapse. And that's useful for just helping you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. Like this farm carrots subreddit right here. Somewhat similar to the Place Hearts subreddit. Oh, and also, the bottom left corner has a whole bunch of patterns that developed early on and disappeared later on that most people don't know about. Things like this alternative, the Rainbow Road, the trans flag started here, the square spiral. I don't know. I call the thing at the top the place diamond. But yeah, there's just a lot of structures and the green corner that people don't know about that started in this region. So yeah, like this zoom, like this is the left mid bottom. It just goes through every region. It shows you like it helps you pay attention more to how each part of the canvas really was different. And so that's how I think this time lapse is especially useful. Yes. Now, okay. So are there other time lapses that are going to be useful? Of course. But one of the main ones is not exactly a time lapse. So I'm going to go to this interactive time lapse made by user free STLR on Reddit, but it's not actually a time lapse. I'm going to open the other one because it's going to take forever. It is interactive time lapse. What's this one? So of course this post right here is claims to be is trying to document all 2017 and 2022 r/place projects. There are some not on here. I'm going to link this post in the description, and it has of course a lot of useful stuff. Let's see. Place time lapse by Maestron. Oh, not working. Acid twist. Okay. So that's 2022. Here's 2017. So the important thing to note about the 27 about this time lapse, which if you watch the other time lapses I told you about that have the beginning of Canvas history, this prehistory where the moderators do things, you'll note that the time bar on if you look closely, you'll notice the time bar in this interactive time lapse does not align with the time given by other time lapses. And then you'll look at the time bar and you'll see how it's counting in whole units, but you don't know what those units are, and you're trying to figure out what those units are. And you try to figure out, is it seconds, is it minutes, and each unit you use doesn't make sense. It makes the event go on for a lot longer. And this, in the end, you will see that there is what is this? 16,556,640 units of time at the end of this time lapse. And the 2022 time lapse is even more confusing because it looks like it's the same structure, right? But it has like 160 million units of time. It says it's time, right? But in reality, this is not time, and this is not a time lapse. And that's why things don't line up with the other time lapses. This interactive time lapse is what is called a pixel lapse. And this rate just determines how often the pixels are placed. So even though there was many hours before this central ball of color was built in 2017, even though there's many hours of prehistory, uh, our place prehistory, pre-canvas history, this time lapse doesn't show those many hours because there weren't many pixels placed by the mods testing out the system. And similarly, this early stage of the canvas where things are really spread out also doesn't last very long, even though it lasts about a full day in real life. Things were very active on the second and third days whenever the canvas was much fuller, but not as many pixels were being placed during the earlier stages of canvas development, which just means that some days are shortened and some days are lengthened. So the reason this matters is basically saying this isn't a time lapse, and it won't actually give you an accurate idea of how the canvas developed over time. It's a pixel lapse. It's useful because it allows you to see the canvas at every minute stage of its development, and the same goes for the 2022 version, which is much larger. It allows you to see the canvas at every stage of its development, but to actually date the images that you can take from this, it's a very complicated process, and you'll probably have to use the data sets themselves. And of course, the time lapses don't provide clear dates for their images, but the advantage is that there is actually a relationship between the amount of time that has passed and the images themselves. So if you have some other source that with dated images, that will help you figure out when any particular second of the time lapse, what time during the actual event that represents. So for r/place 2022, this this set of images that you can compare time lapses to get accurate dates is the r/place canvas history, which shows minute by minute the development of the canvas. As you can see here, I will let it zoom through. And of course, it's staggering. And let's see. I stopped pressing so it can catch up. And so this is 3 hours and 34 minutes in. And you can compare this to other time lapses to see when the 3 hours and 34 minutes mark roughly is. So you can divide between day 1, day 2, day 3, all of that kind of stuff using this thing right here. With 2017, we do have another source that really helps us date things, but it is not nearly as thorough. It's not nearly as good as the 2022 after experience that we got, because it wasn't made by Reddit, it was made by a user. So what we have here is, let's see. How do I get this thread? It's a comment thread. It's a very important comment thread. It's on r/announcements. So let me find it. r/announcements. I need the actual subreddit, the very old subreddit. All right, so r/place datasets. I think I found it like this. Nope. r/place announcement. So I actually found this on Discord, but it's not the best thing to reveal. I'll just type in the URL. So let's see. So I got this from the Green Lattice subreddit. Okay, so I found the user. Yeah. Where is it? r/place announcement, r/place timelapse. It's a very important comment thread. What it is, if I can just find it, r/announcements. So r/announcements is the old subreddit Reddit used for announcements. Now it just uses r/Reddit, which is a very bad name for Reddit's official subreddit because it starts with an R, and they should totally use the r/, take advantage of that, and they should name it r/edit. But let's see. Here is the important thing. I will link to this. So r/announcements place. And it only has the 2017 place announcement. And on this comment, on this post by Reddit, there is an important thread made by user Mudborn. So if I can just open, I just kind of need this. So this comment thread by user Mudborn, and there are responses to it, it has links to images that the timestamps are irregular because they're whenever he could record them. But just all throughout the event, he took pictures of every section of the canvas, focusing on this or that artwork, focusing on various regions, and he made this thread of comments, hundreds and hundreds of comments, or dozens of comments, just going into all of this. And so he provides a large list of roughly dated images that you can compare to the time lapses to help make dates for when help give exact timestamps for when certain r/place events in 2017 happened in real life. Of course, you might also be able to use division, just taking the announcement time, figuring out when the announcement time takes place, and whenever the actual making public of r/place takes place in a given time lapse. But whatever. Anyways, so that's 2017 time lapses. With 2017 time lapses, you want to use David Gill's 1.5 hour time lapse. You want to use Tylesale's 8-minute time lapse and Merrimack's 10-minute time lapse, along with user Freestiller, his interactive time lapse, and user Mudborn's thread with that links to hundreds and hundreds of images covering the development of r/place. There might be other sources you can find, but the importance of this is that he has dated images, which can help you in general. You don't necessarily need to rely on your ability to find an event in the time lapse because of this. And the same goes with this one. So now, what about 2022? 2022 time lapses. Well, r/place time lapse 2022. One of the disadvantages of r/place time lapses in 2022 is that a lot of them were made during the event. And the reason for that is because people were uploading shorts and all of that, covering the event as it happened. And of course, those time lapses were very useful and very popular while the event was occurring. But after the event ended, kind of lost their place. That doesn't matter because the most popular time lapse and the one that shows up, the most popular time lapse is actually this one by Cubicle Brothers, but the one that actually pops up is Reddit's official time lapse. And Reddit's official time lapse, but one of the disadvantages of the time lapses that do cover all of r/place is that r/place in 2022, the canvas expanded multiple times. And most of the time when that happens, the most time lapses will have the expansion only start displaying, like they'll have the expansion display, the expansion will slowly appear. So let me go to the Cubicle Brothers one, because that probably has mute a good example. So as the expansion is occurring, so yeah, you'll note how when the expansion appeared, it was already developed quite a bit. And obviously the expansion didn't look like this whenever the expansion just began. It obviously didn't look this full or, this full. It didn't look that full whenever it just appeared. It was pure white. And the reason it is so full is just because, in some cases, the expansion begins to appear in the video roughly around the time it actually appeared during the event, and it like fades in to the video. But that means that once you actually see the expansion, it's developed quite a bit. Well, Reddit gets around that in their official time lapse by having the expansion, very importantly, start to appear So if you can just like, I'll slow it down a bit so you can just see how it happened. The expansion begins to appear shortly before. Well, the expansion begins to appear shortly before it actually appeared in the event. And that allows it to where whenever it actually appeared in the event, there's this smooth appearance of a white half of the board that then gets filled. So you can actually see the beginning of each expansion in the official time lapse. The problem with the official time lapse is that though you can obviously use it to get a general sense of the event because it's so fast, it's also far too fast to look at anything in detail. And that is where Tylazeal's where Tylazeal's time lapse comes in. You know, the 1 hour and 22 1.5 hour 2022 time lapse I showed you earlier. So Tylazeal's 2022 time lapse gets around the problem of you know, gets around the problem Reddit's so Tylazeal gets around the problem of the expansions in a different way than Reddit does. And the way he does it is he just has the full canvas as it appeared in the end appear at the start. So instead of having the first canvas, the original canvas take up the whole screen at the start of the video, and then have the new canvas appear at the new expansion appear as the old canvas shrinks, you just have the old canvas beginning to get filled in. Like, this doesn't let you see like when it actually appeared in one sense, but it does let you it does make it easy to see how the canvas developed. I mean, it does get around the problem of like the early stages of each expansion being cut out. And of course, he also has an 8-minute time lapse, which is great. So he has an 1.5-hour time lapse and an 8-minute time lapse. So that covers both niches. So you can watch it in the same way, but just faster, or you can watch Reddit's version. But so far, I have not found a time lapse that does something like what Merrimack did with 2017 by zooming in on different regions of the canvas. And what I would really like to see is a time lapse of each quadrant of the canvas. So you have a time lapse of the original canvas, a time lapse that only looks at the first expansion, not the original canvas, and not the second expansion. And then you also have a time lapse covering the left half of the second expansion. You could call it the French quadrant, and the right half. I'll just say it's the blue quadrant or the blue quarter. So, if you're to divide it into quarters, because usually it's divided into expansions, the canvas is divided into the old or the original canvas, the first expansion, also called the New World, and the second expansion, which is also referred to as the final expansion. If you divide it into quadrants, you could call it the old quadrant, the new quadrant, being the top left and the top right respectively, And then at the bottom left, the French quadrant, because the massive French flag, and the bottom right, the blue quadrant, because the blue corner, which really refers more to its dominance in 2017. But if there was a time lapse for each quadrant and also that zoomed into the other regions, that I think would really fill out the time lapse, the set of time lapse niches for 2022. But of course, even where that's not the case, you can look at Reddit's canvas history to just look at how the canvas developed over time, minute by minute. And, that's pretty useful. And if I think about it for a second, 60 times speed would be about a second a minute, right? Except it's not. Oops, something went wrong. Okay. So, yeah. Those are the time lapses you want to use whenever you are trying to actually get a sense of what happened in r/place. And these are the main time lapses I will be using. These are the time lapses I will be using to actually look into r/place's history. And of course, there is the 2022 interactive time lapse. I will also be looking at r/place alternatives, but insofar as I look into r/place itself, these time lapses that I have shown you, which I will link in the description to this video, are the time lapses I would use, and the time